Hey, it's Chris. I wanted to give you a quick overview of an edit that I posted in a few places. A few people asked about what went into the edit. If you've seen this, you've likely seen it on Reddit. You've probably seen it in a couple other smaller forums. I'm going to go over real quick what went into this edit. If you want to know more specifically what happens in each one of these layers, I'm working on another video. I should have it done this weekend. If not this weekend, later this week, where I'm going to go into more detail about the actual technique in each layer. Here, I'm just going to give an overview of what the individual steps were to get this. Now, ultimately, what I ended up with was this, and I'll kind of tell you how we ended up there too, but here's where we were, where most of you saw it. Here's where I started. Contrast wise, there's not a ton of difference from beginning to end, but I'm going to take you through the steps that I do to make the high contrast black and white. With any of my images, my first step is a black and white conversion. I do that black and white conversion with a camera raw filter. I just hit the black and white, but then I do go down to the color mixer and I adjust individual channels to really kind of start pulling that contrast out. In this case, I worked a lot with the reds and oranges and blues, a little bit with the yellows. What I want to show you here is I really darkened the sky by pulling down the blue, but what it did, the windows all of a sudden have kind of a darker look and you can actually kind of see into them. You can see some lights, some shapes. So on the original image, that sky was really reflecting on them and I really like that contrast. But by bringing down the blues, I lost a lot of that contrast. So one of the steps in here, we'll get to in a second, is I really wanted to bring that back. Typically with a lot of my images, I want to do something a little surreal with the lighting and use the light to pull attention to places that I like in the photo. In this case, I really like this corner and obviously the cloud kind of coming into the corner. So I used two curves adjustment layers with gradients to kind of shade the bottom and left of the building to leave light in the upper right hand corner here and draw the attention there. So when I turn those layers on, here's the first layer. I kind of darken the bottom here, and the second layer, I darken the top. I'm just using curves adjustments with gradients across them to give me a dark to light or light to dark change in light to pull attention here. Then I had to deal with those windows. I made a selection. I'll load that here for you real quick. I made a selection of all the windows. So I took the pen tool and just kind of traced out all the windows, saved it as a selection, and what that allows me to do then is to work just on the windows with any changes I make. I'm going to deselect that real quick here. We don't really need that anymore. Initially what I did was I actually started dodging in here to brighten them up and decided I really didn't want to do that, but I saved that layer with the window selected and did a clipping adjustment layer here. I clipped this to the windows layer with the window selected, so when I applied a gradient, it would only affect the windows. And I did a levels adjustment layer there. So we'll zoom out here and I'll show you that levels adjustment layer gives me back that brightness in that window and really gives me back that contrast, right? If I don't have this layer clipped, that gradient shines through all the way across the image, right? So that's why I'm using a clipping adjustment layer there just on the window selection, so I can just affect the windows and get that contrast back. The last thing I did for this image, as far as tonality is concerned, as far as contrast is concerned, is I applied a curves adjustment layer just to bring out the overall contrast in the image. So I'll turn that on, and you can see that's where it gets real contrasty, right? Real light and dark. And if you look in the upper right hand corner here, it's just a simple S-curve adjustment that a lot of us make, or pulling down the darks a little bit, bringing up the lights a little bit, and it really kind of makes it punchy. In the rest of my images then, pretty much all my images, the last thing I'll do is I'll make a layer out of all the visible layers to do my sharpening on. And in most images like this, all I'm going to do is use smart sharpening on that. It works pretty much all the time for what I need it for this type of image. There's a bunch of different ways to sharpen. This isn't the best one. It's not the worst one. Maybe it's not even the right one, but for what I need it for, it works. And then again, after some input from people in a couple places, primarily on Reddit, I did decide that I didn't like the perspective, the leaning perspective. So I cropped and corrected with a perspective crop, straightened the edges out, brought it in tighter, lost that work that I did in the gradients, but I showed you that because most of you saw the non-cropped image. This is ultimately what I got. This is what I printed. It was received fairly well with a set of images kind of in the same style, and I like it. You really kind of you have to see the detail in the top of the building here, and the cloud is a focal point. The composition is maybe non-traditional, and I just like the overall feel of this image. Sincere thanks to everyone who weighed in on this image. You really actually did contribute to the final edit, and I appreciate you for it because I really enjoy the final edit. I hope you do too. Again, if you want to see the technique, the actual techniques that go into these, watch my channel, my YouTube channel for the next video. It'll be out here soon. I've already recorded it. I just have to edit it. And I'm going to show you the individual techniques that go into those gradients on curve adjustment layers, or specifically my black and white conversion process and some of the other smaller details that went into each one of these layers. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you find it helpful. If you have any questions, I love to answer questions. Go ahead and drop a question in the comment. I will get back to you. Thanks.